Hello, my name is Feras I'm a senior consultant S4HANA Cloud with SAP's Digital Business Service Organization. Today, I'll be walking you through how to conduct data migration with S4HANA Cloud's Migration Cockpit. On the agenda today, first I'll begin by elaborating on how data migration fits in within the Activate methodology. Then we'll go ahead and do a quick demo of migrating open sales orders in the system. And then lastly, I'll share with you some of the tips and implementation experiences I have acquired. To begin with, data migration becomes especially important after the discovery and the fit to standard analysis have been done in the prepare and explore phases. Thereafter, we begin loading the template-based approach in the migration cockpit. We conduct data quality assessments and reiterate the process until it is finalized and completed. Specifically on the roadmap viewer, we could see the tasks associated per phase, as well as accelerators available for conducting data migration. Throughout your projects, I strongly recommend following the tasks in the roadmap viewer to facilitate your process for migrating your data successfully into S4HANA Cloud. Of course, today's discussion is revolving around a rather greenfield implementation that simply converts data into S4HANA Cloud using standardized Excel templates. There are other data migration approaches for S4HANA Cloud, such as staging tables, when it is a conversion type of project from, for instance, another SAP suite into S4HANA Cloud. But once again, today we focus on the template-based approach. So now I will walk you through a demo. After having the appropriate rights, you can then access the Data Migration Cockpit. We begin by opening a new project. I will name the migration project and also pay attention that a new ID for the migration project is automatically generated. This could be leveraged throughout implementations if you want to export and import the content from the quality to production system if required. You can also define the retention time of the migration project within your system. Once we open the migration project, we can see a list of available migration objects, as well as documentation that shows the dependencies and relationships, as well as relevant facts to consider per migration object. It is recommended that you thoroughly read through the documentation prior to jumping into the migration object itself. And it could also assist you throughout defining your cutover tasks. So without further ado, I will navigate to today's demo, which will be migrating an open sales order. I have identified this as the migration object and I'll click on Open. Once the migration object opens, you can first download and retrieve the latest version from here of the template. I had previously downloaded the template and actually filled it. Also, do consider that with every release, the migration templates do get updated. Either actual updates, whereby you have additional fields or tabs or additional migration objects, or technical updates for a migration object that is not necessarily exposable to the end user. Therefore, out of best practice, we strongly recommend that with each new release cycle, you make sure that you have the latest working version of the template and you simply copy over the values that you had maintained in your previous versions. Prior to uploading the file and walking you through the different stages of the migration, I'd like to first demonstrate to you how to use the file. Every file comes with a field list that explains whether a tab is mandatory or not, and the mandatory fields for a given tab. I strongly recommend you first visit the field list to acquire important information about how to fill the migration template. Thereafter, every single field contains further information and explanation about its purpose. For instance, here we can see that a mandatory field marked with a star, legacy sales document, is the key field and it's mandatory. You may use internal or external numbering, but it is the unique identifier that will link different tabs of a sales order. You can also unhide certain fields here to allow you to view technical names of the fields if you are more familiar with that. But this is of course dependent on how you would like to use the tool. In this example, I have filled out a sales order that will be created with header information, header texts, item information that contains the material, the item conditions, as well as the schedule line. I have also defined the different partners, in this case the sold to and the ship to, for this new sales order that will be created. Please do make sure that you are working in the XML format and not Excel, as the Migration Cockpit only accepts the XML format of this template. Once you have completed filling out your template, you are ready to upload it and go through the processes of data migration. You may simply upload the file from your area where you have stored it in. In this case, I had saved it on my desktop. You can also give it a description, as well as important comments that you would like to make if you are working in teams and would like to coordinate activities among each other. Also, maintaining descriptions is good for keeping different versions of the iterations of the loads that you have done. Once you upload the file, you first begin by activating it and making it available for migration. Thereafter, you begin the transfer process. First, the system will conduct a check on whether the file structure is appropriate and flag errors at that point in time. This is the lowest level check that is conducted, and as we progress, further deep dives on the errors with regards to the template and how you have filled it are provided. The data validation has been conducted. You could information error messages. Here you have different messages for you. You have information, warning, error, and success. As long as it is not an error message, you can always proceed to the next phase. However, I always recommend making sure you understand and document warning messages so that you can explain why certain messages had occurred to your implementation partners and stakeholders. So in this case, we have successfully uploaded the file and we are now ready to go to the next stage in the migration, which is mapping the values in the source file to what S/4HANA Cloud would expect. For instance, you may load a sales organization value as hello, for instance, but in the Data Migration Cockpit, you want to actually map it to its proper code, which in this case is 1710. The first mapping that must be conducted is whether you would like to have internal or external numbering. If I were to choose external numbering, then this ID would become the ID of the sales order. However, for the purposes of today, I would like the system to auto-generate a sales order ID for me. Therefore, I click on internal numbering. Out of best practice, I strongly recommend going through every single mapping and confirming them one by one, rather than actually selecting all and confirming all mapping values at once. This really helps in avoiding unintended errors. Right now, I am mapping the ISO code for unit of measurement. So please do take into account that when considering, for instance, unit measurements of each piece bottles, that you are using the corresponding ISO code. You can always come back at a later stage and change converting mapping values. But in this case right now, since I have already prepared this file, and to save us time, I'll just go ahead and confirm all mapping values. In the next step, we will simulate the import. And this is the final stage before you actually write to the database. And in this stage, the system actually runs through every record and tries to simulate as if it was writing to the database and flag any errors that you would encounter. This is an extremely important step, and prior to going to executing the actual load, I strongly recommend visiting all the messages that you encounter. In this case, I had no warning messages, neither error messages. And therefore, I am ready to proceed and write to the database. I simply click on Next, and the data will be migrated to S/4HANA Cloud. And voila, this is a successful load. We have right now migrated a new sales order into the system, which is 229. Once you are done with your load, you simply click on Finish and you can proceed with other new loads. For your reference, you can always also download the actual file that you have uploaded. That being said, I just want to show you quickly how you can validate the outcome of your load or trace it. And also, you leverage situation handling, which essentially, if it were to be set up, notifications could be sent to different project stakeholders about the status and progress of the data migrated. Upon clicking on notification, simply you can visit the Data Migration Status app and see high-level information about what has been migrated. So in this case, we are looking at open sales orders. By clicking on that migration object, I can see here the history of records loaded and the corresponding messages. In this case, today we had loaded this sales order, and we can see the legacy ID that was used and the new ID generated. We can also come here and seamlessly view the messages associated. So this is a great way to collaborate and track the status of migration. So that was a simple demo that demonstrated to you how you can use the migration cockpit and load data into the system. Going back to our presentation, despite the fact that the migration cockpit is a simple tool to use, it does bring significant change to the way that projects are conducted in the cloud with regards to data migration. From my experience, especially during cutover plans, as a standard task in ERP implementations would be to conduct mock conversions, which implies actually a full load of the full volume of data replicated into the system, and then an expectation of cleaning the system from that data. However, that does not apply in the cloud. The recommended approach is to load in small iterations, small quantities of data to ensure the quality that you are loading, obtaining a sign-off, and only thereafter, as you get closer to the go-live, you may load a higher volume of data. Therefore, rather than using mock conversions, the recommendation is to use iterations of loads. In addition, please do make sure that you can leverage SAP's help portal to track the changes conducted on migration objects with every release by visiting simply the OSS node available on the support launchpad. This allows you to conduct a release comparison of what had changed with every release. In addition, you may find that although not directly related to the Data Migration Cockpit, you also have tools at your disposal embedded in other scope items that allow you to mass change values of data that you have loaded. This becomes especially handy when, for instance, a business requirement has changed after a user acceptance test, and you need to, for instance, change some data in mass. Then you could come and leverage scope items such as 1RK for mass maintenance of business partners. Once again, it's a file-based approach. In the same line, you could also leverage the API Hub to cover scenarios where currently or as of the release a migration object does not exist. You can come and use APIs to cover that gap. Last but not least, I strongly recommend that you visit the S4HANA Cloud community, the collective note, and as well as other assets that we have available on our help portal. Thank you for listening.